Awesome. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming along. My name is Whittaker. I'm a first-year PhD candidate within the Best Centre. Today, my presentation is more just an overview of my proposed PhD research into deepfakes, their persuasiveness, and potential positive and negative implications for brands. Okay, so deepfakes are what we call a form of synthetic media, and this is media which is both automatically and artificially generated. So deepfakes are a product of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So they use inputs such as video, image, or audio data as training data to generate realistic yet inauthentic output. So this can be a good thing. For example, it can be used within a social marketing campaign. Now, I'm going to play a video. I'm not sure if it's going to be seen by people through Zoom, but I can send a link.
Malaria isn't just any disease. It's the deadliest disease there's ever been.
Se dice que ha matado más de la mitad de la población que ha existido.
وما زالت تقتل طفلاً كل دقيقتين. Mais nous pouvons y mettre fin. Nous savons comment, nous en avons la possibilité.
हमें और अधिक कार्रवाई की ज़रूरत है.
So that's great. Unfortunately, it can also be not such a great thing. So you could, for example, generate a non-consensual deepfake of a prime minister endorsing his opponent during an election campaign. Let's have a look.
My friends, I wish to rise above this divide and endorse my worthy opponent, the Right Honourable Jeremy Corbyn, to be Prime Minister of our United Kingdom. Only he, not I, can make Britain great again.
So, not great. So there's obviously inherent problems with generating highly realistic yet inauthentic realities.
My friends,
let's not do that. Let's not. Okay. So, look into the literature. It's highly emergent. And I'm finding that deepfakes as a concept are being defined quite differently across disciplines. And some are associating deepfakes with quite negative applications. So for example, we looked at social sciences, they're saying it's a piece of deceptive media or a tool for violating consent. Whereas we looked at computer science and they're more concerned with the more fundamental mechanics of deepfakes, for example, the use of autoencoders. So in the literature, there isn't yet quite a interdisciplinary definition of deepfakes which incorporates different perspectives, but also moves beyond the negative applications of deepfakes. So we pose the question, how have deepfakes been defined and conceptualized across disciplines? So literature has identified the both positive and negative motivations to creating deepfakes. So for example, individuals might create them for meme purposes, sharing on social media. Organizations have created them. They've been used in tourist experiences, again, social marketing campaigns and in advertising. But there's also a slew of negative motivations. So for example, they're used within disinformation, blackmail, fraud, revenge porn, and the list does go on. So the gap here is that studies haven't really yet provided a formal framework or conceptualization of the range of actors who create deepfakes and their potential motivations. So we pose the question, who creates deepfakes and what are their motivations? People are more inclined to trust what they see in here. So it's quite obvious that deepfakes have significant potential to be used for persuasive purposes. But there hasn't yet really been a comprehensive theorization of the potential factors which might influence their persuasiveness. So for example, looking here at this deepfake of Barack Obama, are we more persuaded by what they're saying? Is it the quality of the deepfake, the environment he's in, or maybe the prior beliefs we have about Barack Obama? So the question here, what are the factors which influence the persuasiveness of deepfakes? So the implications derived from deepfakes going to marketing as a marketing student, they're relatively unexplored. So there could be intended gains or unintended losses in regard to using deepfakes within marketing material. So for example, gains and losses in brand trust, credibility, brand loyalty. From the customer perspective, there could also be gains and losses. So for example, economic emotional value directed towards the brand which is associated with the deepfake. So we pose the question, what are these intended and unintended outcomes of deepfakes? One psychological mechanism I do want to bring into this discussion is the presence of behavioural biases. So behavioural biases are deviations from the assumption that people are perfectly rational and perfect information processors. So these behavioural biases can produce heuristics, which are systematic errors in judgment, which can provide severe and systematic errors in evaluating information. So these behavioural biases influence our evaluation of information. So these can produce, for example, continued influence effects, confirmation biases in relation to misinformation. Literature is suggesting that deepfakes can leverage behavioral biases, but empirical research hasn't yet been undertaken to actually investigate this. So we pose the question, which behavioral biases influence the persuasiveness of deepfakes and why? So to contribute further into the marketing discipline, I also want to integrate the concept of customer value, but in relation to both value co-creation and co-destruction. So co-creation occurs, for example, between an organization and a customer via a co-creation platform such as social media, let's say Facebook. So value can not only be created, it can also be destroyed. And not only between an organization and the customer, but let's say intentionally by a third party trying to intentionally destroy the value of a customer of an organization, or their perceived value towards an organization. So for example, we might see this, a customer leaving a negative review on an organization's website for other customers to see and destroy their perceived value towards the brand or product. So we don't actually know whether deepfakes can be used by organizations to co-create value with customers, or whether deepfakes can be used maliciously by third parties to destroy the value of other customers of an organization on purpose. So we pose the question, can deepfakes be used to influence value co-creation and co-destruction? I also want to investigate this relationship between behavioral biases and value. These relationships are present in the literature, but we don't know whether behavioral biases leveraged by deepfakes might actually influence customer perceived value. So for example, if someone had a negative perception of Mark Zuckerberg, and that is a deepfake of him, if a person saw this and a deepfake showed him in a negative light, so thus creating a confirmation bias, would this confirmation bias then negatively influence a customer's perceived value, let's say emotional value, towards Facebook? So we ask the question, do behavioral biases leveraged by deepfakes interact with customer perceived value? So my literature search has identified a number of key knowledge gaps, and my PhD aims to address these over 3 studies. So the first study is a hybrid review, incorporating both a critical analysis of the literature utilizing a systematic retrieval process. It's going to be the first to really introduce deepfakes into the marketing discipline, and we're going to have a couple of conceptual outputs. So for RQ1A, we're going to be synthesizing a deepfake definition using Aleximancer. RQ1B, developing a typology of deepfake creators and their motivations, and this informs a research agenda for marketing. RQ1C, we're developing a conceptual framework of factors which might influence the persuasiveness of deepfakes, and both RQ1C and RQ1D creating a research agenda for marketing. So we're going to be systematically retrieving academic and grey literature. Progress so far, I've identified about 140 journal articles using that process, and the grey literature search is about to commence. Okay, this study is changing as of yesterday, as per a confirmation meeting, but what I'm proposing was an experiment. So investigating whether behavioral biases influence the persuasiveness of deepfakes. So we're going to use 3 online experiments, with each experiment investigating the effect of one specific bias upon deepfakes. So we're going to manipulate the behavioral bias via text-based scenarios, and then they will be shown a video. So for example, the deepfake video will be generated via Synthesia. And this platform is great because you can input text and actually outputs an AI presenter who verbalizes that text. That person isn't real, it's an AI presenter. Which is really cool. Okay, so third study, very much down the track. I am looking to look at whether deepfakes influence value co-creation, co-destruction. So this is very reliant on study 2, so I can't go into too much depth, but it is using a similar method. So just have to figure it out, that's all. So general contributions, I won't go through these all, but the main one from theoretical side is the fact that this will be the first real study doing empirical research into deepfakes within the marketing discipline, which is really exciting. And this has practical contributions because we're actually giving empirical evidence of both the opportunities, so value co-creation, and the threats, value co-destruction, which deepfakes can produce towards an organization. Great, thank you very much.